بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So inshallah, today we'll be moving on to the letter Daad. And the letter Daad is considered to be the most difficult letter in the Arabic language. And even in very old classical books of Tajweed, even books written as early as 500, 600 after Hijrah, even in those books, when they talk about Daad, they spend a lot of time on the letter Daad, explaining that people have to make sure they master it properly because it's a very different letter. So inshallah, because this letter is a bit more complicated, we are going to split it into two parts. Today we'll do a part of it, then inshallah tomorrow we'll do or whenever next we'll do the second part of the letter of Daad. So today, inshallah, we're going to discuss number one, how is the letter Daad pronounced, generally speaking. Number two is, how is the tongue positioned before you even pronounce the letter Daad? Where is the tongue supposed to be exactly before pronouncing the letter Daad? And number three, which is a bit different, how does the positioning and pressure of where you're putting the tongue affect the actual pronunciation of the letter Daad? Because all of these things are very important in understanding how the letter Daad is pronounced. So let's move first to how is it pronounced regarding the positioning and stuff. So first thing is, let's see, Saad or Daad. Maybe I accidentally put Saad. That's supposed to be a Daad. I think I accidentally put the wrong letter. Daad is pronounced through contact between two different things. Number one, the sides of the tongue, right? The sides of the tongue. And number two, the upper molars. The upper molars. So along the sides of your mouth on top, you have the molars, those big teeth. So the tongue is generally supposed to come into contact with the upper molars. So now just a bit more detail. So a daad technically requires two rolls from the tongue. The tongue actually has to do two different things to pronounce the letter daad. Number one, the sides of the tongue, that's why I underline sides, the sides of the tongue are going to rest and put pressure on the upper molar. That means the sides of your tongue, they're going to be resting on the upper molars, the upper teeth on the right and left sides. Your tongue is going to be resting there and applying pressure. It's almost like it's going to be like getting a kickback from it. It's going to push towards those side teeth in order to pronounce it. You can, and now this can be done either by putting the tongue on the left molars, or it can be done by putting the entire tongue on the right molars. And for some people who can, they can put it on both at the same time. But normally it's easier to just pick one side that you're comfortable with. Me personally, I do the left side. Some people put their tongue on the right molars on top. Some people can do both. I find it very difficult to do both, but whoever can, they can. So the point is, your entire tongue will not only be resting, you'll almost be pushing against the upper molars and the upper teeth. I will talk a bit more about this in the next slide, inshallah. So that's the sides of the tongue. So there's more two rows. So that's the sides of your tongue. That's where the sides of the tongue, they're going to be pushing against and resting on the upper teeth, the upper side teeth. And you can choose which side, left or right. The tip of the tongue, so we talked about the side. Now, what about the tip of the tongue? The tip of the tongue will be lightly touching, not resting, lightly touching the gums that are behind the upper front teeth. So right where your upper teeth are, go slightly above that till about here. It shouldn't be on the teeth. Your tongue shouldn't be directly touching the teeth. It's okay if it's kind of partially touching the teeth or something. That's not a big deal. But it should be somewhere right around here. But it's lightly touching it. It's just touching it. You're not putting pressure there. So this front tip of your tongue will be placed right around here, right behind the upper teeth. So now your sides are on the molars, or whichever side. Let's just say left side. Your left side of your tongue is on the left molars, resting there. And the front tip of the tongue is just touching the area, the gums that are right behind the upper teeth. So what's actually essentially happening before we go to the next line? What's happening is you're basically using your tongue to block off all of the air that's coming from your throat. So because you're putting your tongue against the sides and you're touching the front, this air is coming from your throat and it's filling up in your mouth, and it can't go out because your tongue is covering everywhere. It's covering the sides and it's covering the front. So the air can't really leave. It's almost like it's trapped, and it's slowly becoming more and more and more inside your mouth because you've trapped it from the front and the sides. It can't leave. So that's basically what's happening in the letter Daad. After that, after you've positioned your tongue, the air and sound actually comes in your mouth to produce the letter Daad. We'll get a bit more into this later, inshallah. So the main thing to understand right now is the actual positioning of the tongue. And just to kind of, so we understand this properly. So if you can see the yellow areas, so the picture on the left represents the upper teeth, not the bottom teeth. The picture on the left represents the upper teeth, So this yellow area of the tongue is lightly going to be touching this yellow area right behind your teeth. It'll be lightly touching it. You're not going to put pressure there. You'll lightly be touching this area. And we'll talk about later about what's going to happen if you do put pressure. You're going to make another letter completely. So this front part of your tongue is going to be lightly touching. It still has to touch it. It can't be that it's not touching. Should be touching this area enough that it stops the air from coming out. Kind of like for a lamb. When you say lamb, so you're not pushing too much on the lamb, but it's enough to block the air from coming out from the front, and the lamb's air has to go from the sides of your mouth. So to kind of like a lamb, right? The way you put your tongue for pronouncing a lamb. But on top of that, the next thing is the sides of your tongue, which are these. So you can choose whichever side, left or right, up to you. Let's just take the left side. So this left side, for example, it'll be putting pressure on the left teeth. So this is where the actual pressure is going to be. So your tongue will actually be resting on the side teeth and applying pressure there as well to pronounce the Daad. And the front of the tongue will just be placed on the front area right behind the upper teeth, just so it's touching it, not really applying pressure. So this is the positioning of the tongue. This is before even the letter is pronounced. This is going to be the position of your tongue. Front tip of the tongue, right behind the upper teeth, just touching it. Side of your tongue is going to be applying pressure on the side teeth on top. So that's how the tongue should be positioned. So just so we understand once more, so the tip of the tongue is only going to touch these portions on top without really applying any pressure. And the sides of the tongue are going to be along the sides of the upper teeth, and you will apply pressure there. You will apply pressure and fully be resting on those sides. Now you can choose one side, once again, left or the right side. So that is generally understanding how your tongue is supposed to be before the letter Daad is even pronounced. So we haven't gotten to pronouncing the letter Daad yet. Now let's inshallah move on to the next slide. So now, once you've understood the whole positioning of the mouth, of the tongue, once the sides and the tip of the tongue are positioned, what's going to happen now is air and sound should be coming out from the throat, and without letting the tongue be released. So what's going to happen then is you're going to let the air and sound come into your mouth, and it's going to start filling up in your mouth little by little by little. Because of this, what's going to happen is the air and all the pressure that's building up, it's going to build up behind the tongue. Because remember, your tongue is blocking the air. So slowly, all that air and pressure is going to build up behind the tongue. And because of that, two things are going to happen. What are those two things? Number one, the tip of your tongue will slightly move forward, slightly. But when you push that air, the tip of your tongue will slightly move forward and is going to start pushing itself against these teeth. So your tongue will be somewhat here in the beginning, or maybe not exactly here. Everyone's mouth is different. And when you bring in that air, it will move a little bit down, sometimes down till not all the way down, sometimes till the middle of your teeth, sometimes till here, but it's going to push it. So the front of your tongue will kind of go down towards the front teeth, and it'll kind of be pushing against it. Second thing that's going to happen is because of all of this pressure, the mouth and the cheeks are going to inflate. They're going to inflate kind of like a balloon due to all of the buildup of air. If you see Qurra, when they try to explain how to pronounce a Daad, their actual cheeks become inflated, right? So the whole cheek becomes big right before the Daad comes out. So there's like a sound, that sound. That's actually the letter Daad coming in. And then finally it's released. Da, da, lu, li, da, lu, li. We'll get more into that inshallah later when we go through the mutaharrik and sakin of it. But so now this entire process of the air coming in, being trapped by the tongue, and because of that, your mouth inflates, and because of that pressure, the tongue moves forward. This whole thing in Arabic is known as istitala. It's called istitala. Istitala means when you make something long. When you pronounce a Dad, it takes a bit of time to do it because there's multiple processes. First, the air comes in, then the air fills up, then the tongue goes a bit forward, and then the tongue is released to make the Dad. Because it's very long, this whole process is called istitala in the letter Dad. Only the letter Dad has this process called istitala. So this is generally how the letter Dad is pronounced in the B. After that, you release your tongue and say Dad, and whatever it may be. So inshallah, so this is where we're going to end off. Tomorrow we'll discuss the actual pronunciation with examples and a few more things, and we'll discuss this a bit more again, so everyone's a bit more clear. And then we'll discuss some errors that are made when pronouncing the letter Dad.